Welcome, installers. What you'll see in this DVD is a product that you may not have known even existed. It's underdecking from Quality Edge. And what we're going to show you is the manufacturer's recommended installation process. Now, this underdecking DVD is separated into two sections: step-by-step instructions and frequently asked questions. And for your convenience, you can go directly to a section or watch the program in its entirety. But be sure to hang on to this DVD, because within the frequently asked questions section, you'll find many useful tips and recommended procedures. To properly install underdecking, you'll need the following tools: a cordless drill, metal snips, a standard hammer, a speed square, a caulk gun with butyl-based caulk or butyl tape, a pencil, utility blade, a zip tool, which is used to remove vinyl siding, a hand brake for bending aluminum, a 25-foot tape measure, a skill saw with a metal cutting blade and a wood cutting or ripping blade, and a 10-foot or larger field brake. Before we get started with Quality Edge installation professional Ben DeGraff, it's imperative that the flashing installed with the deck was done properly. This begins with the ledger board, which is the board that's been attached to the home to support the weight of the deck. It should be flat against the house. Make sure the ledger board wasn't installed over the top of the siding. Flashing should run behind the siding and over the top of the ledger board. Decking material should then lie on top of this. If the flashing is absent or fails to channel water away from the house, this must be corrected. You have two options. One, remove the deck boards closest to the ledger board and install flashing. Or two, install flashing under the ledger board and against the wall. Once you're satisfied with the integrity of the ledger board flashing, you're ready to create a beautiful underdeck that will last many years.
The first step is to decide where we're going to drain the system. The location where the water ends up is always critical because of what can happen around foundations and drainage and pooling water and mosquitoes and all those things. So in this particular case, because we already have a beam out here, we can put the gutter on this beam. We can slope our panels down to this gutter and drain away from the house. The slope of the underdeck ceiling is obviously critical because the water needs to drain in the panels out to the gutter. But in most cases, an excessive amount of slope can be avoided. And what I like to do to determine my slope is to let the objects in the placement of my underdeck ceiling determine where the gutter goes and therefore the G-channel goes. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate to you now what I mean about the slope discussion. I'm going to temporarily install this pan, and I'm going to use that as my guide to determine the height of my gutter and my G-channel. As you can see, I've temporarily installed a carrier, and the reason I say temporarily is because that carrier is going to come back down once I've determined my G-channel and gutter locations, and it's going to get moved over into its proper position. So what I'm going to do with one carrier up, and it's going to be the carrier on the high side, I'm going to put a pan into it. I'm going to put a little piece of G-channel on the high side. And on the low side over here on the beam, I've got a little piece of gutter that I'm going to use as my guide. And now I'm going to determine the location of my gutter here. Because I'd like to have my G-channel all the way up to the bottom of that utility trim, I'm going to keep raising this gutter until I take all the bend out of the panel, and that's going to be where the gutter gets installed. So I raise that up until it's a nice straight line. I go ahead and mark the wall, and that's the high side of my gutter. So my next step is going to be to install the G-channel. The G-channel gets installed right on top of the siding. I want to use at least 1.5 inch to a 2-inch screw to install the G-channel because I want to make sure that I get all the way back to the sheathing with my fastener. Now, before I do that, I want to seal the back of this G-channel. And the importance of sealing the back side of this G-channel is that that's what keeps the water from running behind it down the wall. So before I put my G-channel up, I want to pre-miter the end where the side cap comes into it. And the reason I do this is it's a lot easier to get a nice cut on my miter on the ground like this, where it's right in front of me, than trying to do it when it's already up on the wall. The G-channel comes 10 feet long, so inevitably you're going to have to join pieces together. As you can see, I've made bird's beak cuts out of each of the angles on that G-channel all the way around. I take those cuts and I fold the tabs in, and that allows this piece of G-channel to fit into the one next to it. All right, the last step in installing the G-channel is any place you have a joint in the G-channel. As you can see right here, this is my joint. I'm going to take a piece of window tape and I'm going to put that over the top of that joint so the water coming down the wall, running over that joint, won't leak. Then I'm also going to seal with another bead of caulk right where the top of the G-channel comes into the siding. I'm going to put a bead of sealant right there. So now you can see I finished putting up my G-channel. That's all the way on the wall. And what I've also done is this temporary row of carriers here, this first row, I've continued that all the way through my system so that I can put up 4 temporary panels that are going to be my guide for how high to install my gutter. I've previously marked the center of this gutter and the center of my beam. So what I do is I line up those 2 center marks. I bring the gutter right up to the panels, so the panels are resting on the beam. And then I'm going to go ahead and pin the middle. And then what I do is I work my way back down to the high side, the high end of the gutter, and I'm going to straighten it out and permanently fix it, working from high end to low end. So now that I've set my high side of my gutter, using my panel as my indicator as to where it needs to be, now I'm going to work my way down to the low side of the gutter, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring it up to where my panel slant tells me it wants it. Go ahead and install that. Now what I do is I sight between my 2 endpoints and I look for, again, I look for belly or crown. And I can see that where I temporarily pin the gutter in the middle here, it's too low. So what I've got to do is go down to the middle and raise that up. You can see it in there where when I took the screw out, how the gutter kind of popped up to where it wanted to be. I'll go back and check it one more time. Now I've got a nice straight line. Now I can go ahead and put the rest of the gutter screws in. Okay, as you can see now, I have my gutter installed. And I'm going to do one last check to make sure I have good drainage in my gutter. I'll measure from the bottom of my beam to the bottom of my gutter here, and I have 3 inches. Now I've already measured the far side, and it's 2.5 inches. So that tells me I have a 1/2 inch fall from this end to the 20 feet down at that end, which ends up to be a 1/4 inch and 10 feet, which is just what I want. And you'll also notice that I've taken down that temporary row of carriers over here and those 4 panels that I was using to align my gutter height over here. So those are gone. Now I'm ready to install the side cap. This is the side cap piece. If you'll remember, I pre-mitered my G-channel over here for the side cap to fit in. But now what I have to do on the gutter side is the lip of the gutter needs to get notched out so that that side cap will rest down in there and the panels will be at the same elevation. So again, what I'm going to do is line up the leg of my side cap with the inside of the rim joist, have it come straight down so that this top surface of my side cap lines up with this top surface of my gutter, and then I go ahead and mark the gutter where I'm going to cut it out so that the side cap comes down and drains into the gutter. I'm going to go ahead and cut those 2 lines, score the bottom of it with a utility knife, and crack it out. So now I'm going to go ahead and put this up. First thing I do is I set it into my notch on my gutter. Second thing I do is I fit it around this column like that. And then lastly, I'm going to push this back and get it up into the miter in my G-channel. Once I have it in position where I want it, I go ahead and zip screw it right into my inside of my rim joist. So here I am putting up the second side cap, and this will complete the aluminum framework, and then I'm ready to go ahead and put up my panels. Now we're going to permanently install those carriers. So what I want to do is mark off my run, my length of my panels, and divide it into even spaces. Now I've measured this distance. So from the inside of my G-channel to the back of my gutter, I have 113 inches. So I'm going to take 113 inches, and I know, I want my carriers to be about 3 to 3.5 feet apart. So I'm just going to divide 113 by 3, and I happen to end up with 38 and 3/10 inches. So to make it simple, what I'm going to do is simply mark my joists. I'm going to mark it right here at 38 inches, and I'm going to mark it over here at 76 inches. And that's where my 2 carriers are going to go. So before I go ahead and put my first carrier up, I want to show you how the carrier and the side cap come together. Here's my little shortcut piece of side cap. This is my end of my carrier, and there's a lip on my side cap right there. That's got to fit right in between those teeth, and the side cap's going to rest right on that, and the carrier is going to rest right on that lip. So all the way in the teeth, carrier resting on the lip of the side cap. Now that's important for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's important because it sets the elevation of my carrier. So if my carrier is running straight from one side cap to the other side cap, I end up with a nice flat ceiling. Take the wave out of your carrier as you're installing your panels, okay? But the other reason is because by starting my carrier in my side cap all the way pushed in like that, my teeth will line up in this direction. Because if my teeth between my carriers aren't lined up the way the panel snaps in, the panel's not going to fit in there. Or it will fit in there and telegraph oil can through the paneling. So by nesting it into the side cap, the same elevation, the same distance, I'm going to get nice straight rows between my carrier teeth. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and permanently install my carrier. I'm going to rest it on the lip of the side cap, put it on my mark. Come over here with my 1/4 inch zip screw, screw it into the joist. Now I go back down the line and I attach it to each joist. Okay, now that we have one carrier up, what I'm going to show you is how to connect carriers. And when you connect carriers, what you have to do is use a splice. So when I cut my splice out, I'm going to find that little slot in the edge of the carrier. I'm going to cut to that slot on both sides. And then I just lift it and crack it out. I put that in my hand seamer, and I'm going to score it with my utility knife. Score it a couple times, then I'm going to crack those teeth right off. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Score it twice. And crack it away. And what I do is I take that and I compress it like this so that it will fit up inside the carrier itself. Once I've got that inside the end of my carrier, I'm going to slide it back and forth until these holes on the side line up. When I get those holes to line up, I go ahead and run a screw through both of them on both sides of the splice. That's what maintains the proper spacing between the teeth from one carrier to the next. Now I'm going to go ahead and slip this splice up inside the other carrier. I can look at the side and see when my holes are lined up, and I can go ahead and put my screw in. Now when I bring my other carrier up, it's going to go right over the splice on the other side, line my holes up, and run another screw in. So now I'm going to finish off this row of carriers, and I'm going to have to cut a piece to size here. So I'm going to go ahead and set this on my splice that we just installed. I'm going to get it up here in line and slide it so that it butts to the other one, which will be adjusted later, but I'm doing that just to get my correct length for where I cut this one. So I get a mark, and then I'll bring it down and cut it all the way through. Now, if you remember on the other side, what I did was I notched the side cap tooth into that little opening between the bottom of the tooth and the rail. But because we don't know quite where the side cap's going to hit on this side, I'm going to bend these teeth 90 degrees like this. And what that will do is it'll allow this to slide on my side cap, just like that, so that I can adjust it to length over at my splice. So what I can do now is I can go ahead and I can rest this on my splice here, and I can rest it on the side cap here. And then when I have it in place, I can let go of it because it's being supported, and I can go down here and I can finish screwing my splice together to keep my alignment right. So now I've got my last piece of carrier, section of carrier in place, line the holes of my splice up with my carrier itself, screw that together, and now again, the spacing between these teeth, between the two carriers, is the same as all the rest of the teeth, and I can go ahead and attach it to my joist. So now that we've got our first row of carriers in, we're ready to run our second and third rows of carriers. We're going to do that by, again, hanging them from screws, but as you'll notice, I haven't drawn this screw all the way up tight to the joist. The reason I did that is because this second carrier has to be lower, because that's how I slope down to my gutter. So my second, third, and fourth rows of carriers are all going to be lower from the joists as you go down towards the gutter. So I'm just going to put each second and third row of carriers up with 1 or 2 screws just to get them in place, and then I don't set the final elevation till I put my paneling in. Now, as you can see, I've got my second row of carriers up, and as I said earlier, I did not draw the screws all the way tight to the bottom of the joist because that's how I put my fall in my system. As I get closer to the gutter, those carriers are going to be lower and lower off the joists. So now I just kind of put it up there with a couple screws. I turn and I eyeball it, look down it, try to get it semi-straight, because I'm not going to do my final adjustments until I'm actually putting in my panels, and that's when I'll put my set screws in. right, now we're going to talk about cantilevers. This section of the deck right here is what we call a cantilever. As you can see, it's hanging over this beam. If you remember previously, we talked about attaching the gutter on the inside of this beam. The panels coming off the house drain into that same gutter. Now what we're going to do is divert the water from this side of the beam over the top of it and into that same gutter by using this. We call this a pan flashing. And I made this out of trim coil on the brake. It's simply a V bent piece of metal with two sides bent down. You want to be sure to install the cantilever flashing before you start running any of your panels. Once your panels are installed, you won't be able to get up and access the flashing in order to caulk it and seal it to the wood. And what we do with this is we take it, and it's bent to size. I put it up in between my joists. I go over the top of my beam with it. I push it all the way to the bottom side of the deck boards on the outside, and then I'm going to put caulking and screw it to the inside of the beams. So the purpose here is for the water to fall through the deck boards here, lands in this pan, drains over the top of my beam, and lands in the same gutter on the inside. To attach the flashing, I'm going to grab this lip that I bent on the edge of it here with the pliers and pull it away from the side of the joist, get up in there with my caulk gun, fill that with caulk, then I'm going to let go of it and just let it squeeze out right onto the side, and then I'll go ahead and put a zip screw in there to hold it in place. Okay, now we're ready to install our first panel. And what I've done is I've taken my little splice of side cap again so I can show you how the panel and the side cap fit together. First panel is going to nest right into the side cap, just like that. Now in order to do that, if you take a look up here, you can see that the teeth of my carrier are in the way. So what I have to do is I have to bend those teeth sideways, just like I did on the other end. Bend them sideways at a 90-degree angle to get them out of the way. Now I can take my panel, I go up over the gutter, up into the G channel, and then I slide it back. Now I can push it over into the side cap. So now I reach up in there to make sure I'm fitted into my side cap, and then I roll the outer lip in. And I do that by pushing up with my thumbs, pull it back, and snap it. And as I said earlier, I go up over the gutter, up into the G channel, and then I slide it back. Now I take my two thumbs, I put them here on this lip, and I roll it up, pull it back to me, and then reach back and lock the backside. So as I'm installing my panels here, I come across the joist. Every time I'm going to cover a joist, I'm going to check my panel to see if there's a belly in it, you know, where it sags in the middle, or if there's a crown in it, or if possibly it's not resting on the gutter right here. Now the way I can adjust that is by raising and lowering my carriers. So in this case, I got just a little bit of a belly in the bottom of my pan, so I'm going to raise this carrier up right here till I get that belly out of there, and make sure that I'm still resting on the pan over here, on the gutter over here. Now once I get that nice and straight and I'm resting on the gutter, I want this carrier to stay right here, so I'm going to go over here with another screw out of this next hole, and I'm going to put a screw up into that same joist on an angle. Now the combination of the screw straight up and the screw at an angle keeps that carrier from bouncing up and down on the screw, and it locks it at that elevation. As you can see, we're almost to the end here, and what you want to do when you get towards the end is you want to leave the second to the last panel out before you try to put the last panel in. There's a couple reasons for that. Is number one, the last panel inevitably is going to have to be cut to size and fitted up inside there. And we're also going to zip screw that last panel to the inside of my side cap here to hold it in place, since there's not going to be a carrier on the far side of it that it can lock into. So here I have my last panel all pre-cut. I've sized it, cut it to size. As you can see, I've left a little bit of a lip on it here that I'll put my zip screws through when I get it into my side cap. So I fit it in place just like if it were a full-size panel, up over the gutter, up into the G, slide it back, and now I'm ready to screw it into the side cap. Okay, with my last panel in place here, now you can see why it's important that I leave the second to the last one out. I'm going to have to get up inside here and zip screw this last panel into my side cap. Okay, so now I've been up inside here, fastened my last panel to my side cap. I'm ready to go ahead and put up the second to the last panel. Again, the same sequence, up over the gutter first. Line it up with the G channel and slide it over. There we go. Last panel's in place. We've got to finish sealing. Now I'm ready to cover this up. So I take my short pieces of panel, I put G channel on just one side, and I do that so I can feed it in here and then bring it down into position. Once I get it in position, I kind of line it up with the panel on the other side of my beam, and now I'm ready to zip screw it in place. I put my zip screw up here in the rib. Now that panel will stay right there. So now on my cantilever, I've run my panels all the way to the end of my outside G channel. Now I'm ready to add another one. Get that lined up. And now I'm ready to slide in more panels till I get out here to the end. Okay, so I'm here to the end of my cantilever. I've run G channel down both sides. I've been sliding my panels in the G channel, getting them in position, lining them up with the panels on the other side, zip screwing them to the top of the G channel. Now I've just slid my last G channel cap on the end here, and I'm ready to screw that in position. Another detail we don't want to overlook is the installation of the downspout. This is just a standard aluminum downspout. And another way to enhance the system is you could put a rain barrel at the bottom of this downspout, and the homeowner could use the water on their garden. Just a reminder, the FAQ section of this DVD shows you more in-depth procedures. It'll give you details on how to install a ceiling fan, how to remove and replace a panel. I highly recommend you look at it. It just might save you some time.